We're going to go ahead and take a look at graphing functions. Now, some functions are pretty easy to graph off the top of your head. Here we just have a line. Other functions are a little bit more challenging. You may not know exactly what they look like, and therefore you can always make yourself a t-chart or an xy chart. Well, in this case, since it's a line, I'm going to use the idea, since it's already in the form of y equals mx plus b, m has to be your slope. So you know your slope is 3, which means you're going to have to go up 3 and over 1. But you're going to have to do that from your y-intercept, and your y-intercept then is your 2. So then you're going to go and start at 2. Then you're going to go up 3 over 1. Or you could go down -3 to the left, which is -1, and -3 over -1 is also 3. Same idea here. And then all you want to do is just go ahead and draw yourself a line. Well, here we know this one's not a line because our exponent is 3. So we can't use the idea of your point or your y-intercept and your slope, so we're going to just make a t-chart. I just randomly chose some values here. Most of these are going to be near the origin, so I just chose 3 numbers on each side of the origin. Take a -3 and plug it in. -3 cubed is -27 times a half. -2 cubed is -8 times a half. -1 cubed is -1 times a half. Plug in 0, 0 cubed times a half. And then you're going to just basically add the positive versions of those when you plug in those there. So then all you're going to do is you're going to come along and you're going to just plot those points. So you have 0, 0, then you have 1.5, and then you have 2, and you have 4, and then you have 3, and you have 13.5, which is off my graph, so I'm not going to be concerned about that. And then you got to go left 1 and down a half, and then left 2 and down 4, and then you're going to just draw a smooth curve in connecting all those. And you end up getting this. So here we're going to look at the equation of a circle. When you're dealing with a circle, what's after the x when it's in this form is the x-coordinate of your center. Opposite of what's after the y is then the y-coordinate of your center. So it's opposite of what's after the x, opposite of what's after the y is the coordinates of your center. Then r squared is over here, and r is your radius. So let's go ahead then and take a look at this problem. You want to take the opposite of what's after your x, opposite of what's after the y, and then you want to go ahead and find r. Well, in this case, since r squared is what's over here is your 4, you then got to go ahead and find r. So that means what squared gives you 4, and then well, that's just 2. So plot your center, which we have right here. Go 2 units each way, and then draw a circling going around all that. And so there's your circle. Well, here's also an equation of a circle, but it's not in the form we need that we were talking about on the previous page. So we need to get it into this form right here. To do that, you have to complete the square with the x's, and you have to complete the square with the y's. So we're going to go ahead and take our equation, and when you complete the square, you need to make sure you have a 1 in front of your squared terms. So that means you got to divide everything by 9 on each side here. To complete the square then, you want to take your x terms, get them kind of together, take your y terms, get them together, take your non-y term, non-x term to the other side, your constant. Well, if you put your x's together, you get this. Put your y's together, you get this. Put your 4/9 on the other side, you have this. You now need to complete the square. So here's your b, because b is always in front of the term with the first power. Take half of that. That's multiplying the bottom by 2, which is a 4 over 6, which reduces down to 2/3. Then you want to go ahead and square that. And if I add that here, I got to also add that over here. Same idea here. Take half of this, which doubles the bottom, which then becomes 2/6, which is 1/3. If I add that here, I got to also add it over here. So on the right side, I get 1/9. This is a perfect square. What's being squared here goes in the beginning. What's being squared here, a 1/3 goes in the end, and it's always your first sign. Same idea with your x's. So once again, it's the opposite of what's after your x, opposite of what's after your y. Now, this is your r squared here. Since r squared is equal to that, to find r, you'd have to take the square root of both sides. The square root of your 1 is 1. Square root of your 9 is 3. So you get your center and you get your radius. Now you need to find the equations of your upper half and lower half. Since your upper half and your lower half, upper and lower go up and down, you're going to have to go ahead and solve this for y. So let's take our equation right here and solve it for y. So here's our equation. To get y by itself, you want to get this squared stuff to the other side, so let's subtract that. Now you need to go ahead and get rid of the squaring, so let's take our square root of both sides. Now we're not able to go ahead and take the square root of this first part and the square root of the second part because there's a subtraction sign here. So there's nothing more we can really do to simplify that. Your upper half is just the positive root. Your lower half is then just the negative root because lower goes down and the negative root would go down. Well, we need to do a very similar thing when we're looking at the left and the right halves of our equation. Left and right goes in the direction of the x's, so that means we got to go ahead and solve our equation for x. So we're going to go ahead and start with our basic equation right here, and we're going to go ahead and get our x's right here by themselves, so that's why we subtracted our y squared to the other side. So now I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the squaring. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Once again, I cannot take the square root of the 64 and the square root of the y squared because there's a subtraction sign there. I can't do anything to that. But my square root on the left undoes my squaring. So now I need to go ahead and take and get that plus 3 out of there. So I get this here. So now I need to realize which one goes to the right, which one goes to the left. Well, the positive root goes in the positive direction. So that would be your right half because you're going to the right. And then your negative root here would have to be going in the negative direction, which would be farther to the left. So that's your negative root. Now, on a side note, if you're dealing with your equation of a circle and you get your r squared on the far right hand side, and so I'm talking about this number right here, like in the spot of the 64. If that's greater than 0, then yes, it is a circle. If that r squared ends up being 0, really then it's just a point, and that's the center. If your r squared is less than 0, meaning negative, well, you can't have any number giving you a negative after you square it here when you're dealing with real numbers, so there wouldn't be anything that would work, so then it would be no solution.